We're going to move on to our next portion, which is our panel discussion. This one is live in person, so great. A round of applause for that. We do have so many different communities coming together on this panel discussion with us, and we have Aiden Casa, who's moderating the event for you guys. She is a program manager at HBN for Tigray. She also is the co-founder as well as president of Legacy for Tigray. I'll bring her up here to give you guys more details of all of her work as well as the panel discussion that she'll be moderating today. So if you guys could give her a round of applause as she makes it up to the stage. Yes, with the Straight Outta Tigray t-shirt on as well.
It's a bit too high for us, for the short people. Anyways, thank you everybody. Thanks for being here. Today is a hard day, but I hope you can hear me well. And I'm gonna just be mindful about our timing as well, because we pushed it. So with our panelists, you will have a chance to speak with them, ask all the questions you wanna ask. So I will not sort of allow you to ask the questions, but it will be just short, something to give you an idea of what all these communities are doing and why we are here today. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, guests, fellow advocates, and survivors. Thank you for joining us today as we gather to commemorate the victims of genocide and unite our collective efforts to pursue such atrocities in the future. I stand before you as a co-founder and president of Legacy Tigray Advocacy Group, but also as a fellow human being who's more committed to the cause and justice of remembrance and prevention. Today, we come together as not only as representatives of our communities, but the Tigray, Nuer, Armenia, and Rohingya communities, but also as the voices of resilience and advocates for the world that refuses to turn a blind eye to the pain and suffering of innocent lives. The echoes of history reminds us that a profound responsibility that we have and that we have to carry to ensure the dark chapters of genocide are never repeated. Our presence here representing a diverse communities with shared experiences reflect that the strengths that can emerge from unity. It is a testament to the resilience of a human spirit, a spirit that refuses to be broken, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. In commemorating the victims of genocide, we acknowledge the profound impact such atrocities have on individuals, communities, and families. It is a dark occasion, but let's not forget that within the shadow of tragedy, seeds of hope can be planted. Today, we sow the seeds of remembrance, understanding, and advocacy. Our collective responsibility as humanity is to break the chains of silence and indifference. Genocide, in its all forms, thrives in darkness. It is fueled by ignorance and apathy. Today, we be pledged to the torch barriers of truth and justice. We stand united against the forces that seek to erase the rich tapestry of cultures and identities that make our world vibrant and diverse. As we remember the past, let us draw strengths from the stories of survivors and resilience within our communities. Our shared experiences bind us to a common purpose: to create a world where no one has to endure such horrors of genocide. It is a lofty goal, but one within our reach if we work together, hand in hand. So, in the face of despair, we find inspiration. In the midst of darkness, we ignite the flames of awareness. Let this event be a catalyst for change, a call to action that echoes far beyond these walls today. Together, we can be the architects of the future, where the haunting memories of genocide are replaced by the triumphs of human decency. May our collective efforts pave the way where the world we leave behind is part of one of compassion, understanding, and peace. So thank you for coming today. So I'll be calling our panelists to our nice chairs for today. So we are here today from different communities, but also it was a wonderful opportunity to hear from Carl as well about Rwanda. But genocide is happening everywhere. Sadly, that is the reality of it right now, or at least human rights violations. So we have panelists and communities. Annie Shug, from co-founder of Rerooted from Armenia community. She will be discussing the topic of advocacy. Dr. Yolchek, assistant professor of philosophy from St. John's University from Nuer community. His topic will be justice and accountability. Abraham Marag, PhD of Peace and Development Studies from Tigray community. His topic will be social media and violence. And Imran, a journalist and a human rights activist from Rohingya community. His topic will be diaspora of mental health during a genocide. So please give me a hand for our panelists so they can join us on our chair. Thank you. Yeah. All right, thank you everybody again. Thank you for being here. I'm going to stand. It's just a bit uncomfortable being able to read and sit down. So today we'll be asking just a few questions to our panelists on their advocacy, their efforts, and why they continue to do what they do, which is raising awareness about their communities and what it means for the future of the world, not just for our communities. So Annie, thank you for joining us today. Annie drove from Pennsylvania this morning, so please give her a big hand. So Annie, I just have a couple questions for you. Our question today is, how can advocacy efforts evolve and adapt to address emerging forms of genocide and mass violence in the modern world and to mobilize support of intervention and prevention? The second question is, what challenges exist to raise awareness of genocide and educating the public, and what strategies can you help overcome these challenges? Thank you, Annie.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today, and solidarity from Armenian communities to the Tigray community and all other communities up here is something that's so important for me. And all the applause to my husband for driving, because he does not like to wake up early. Yeah, so for the first question, I kind of want to go through the history of Armenian advocacy, and then the second question, what myself and other Armenians are doing today to advocate for both the past and the present. So for the first question, sort of can go through 100 years of Armenian advocacy and how we've sort of dealt with the aftermath of our genocide. So the Armenian genocide happened in the early 20th century. So the biggest date that most people know and sort of the year of the most violence was 1915. And as a result of the genocide, 1.5 million Armenians were killed, and almost all Armenians essentially were deported from our lands in what is now Turkey. And so Armenians ended up all around the world forming very strong diaspora communities in the aftermath of that. So many of the refugees first went to Syria and Lebanon, formed strong communities in the Middle East. From there, went to France, the US, like my family, sort of all over the world. And I think those first generations, from what I've heard from the oral histories I collect and from my own family, were so focused on really preserving our own identity, forming strong communities, keeping the institutions that we had back home, building new ones. So in most Armenian communities, wherever you go, you can find schools, churches, many different political groups, like other centers. So that was sort of the first generation, their focus. And then from there was sort of this open question to, no one has recognized what we went through. So the Turkish Republic was founded sort of out of the aftermath of the genocide and have a complete stance of denial for what happened. And then the US, because of their relations with Turkey, also denied what happened. So I think the generation that sort of came after those survivors was filled with a lot of anger and feelings of isolation and resentment, like we went through this and it's being ignored. And it went in different directions. So some groups took, sort of more militant approaches. Other groups were just trying to raise education, awareness, build stronger communities. and it was sort of all over the place. But in the last several decades, the Armenian community is really politically sort of focused a lot on recognition. And to some, it feels like a detriment because we're so far in the past. Like, we still have to be focusing on what happened 100 years ago because we never received that recognition. But it was because we never received it, it was sort of a big focus. So there are different like lobbyist groups that formed, a lot of focus on getting the US to recognize. And finally in 2019 was the first time that Congress ever recognized the Armenian genocide. And it was sort of, it felt like this moment of, this is all we've been talking about for 100 years. Like growing up in Armenian community and Armenian school, this was all we talked about. So it sort of felt like this moment, like, is this it? Like, do we move on? Is it done? But then unfortunately in the last few years, we've seen sort of ethnic cleansing and ethnic discrimination come back to our community. And it's sort of this feeling, I think, because yes, the US recognized it, but Turkey still doesn't recognize it. It's not a worldwide accepted fact, and it's allowed the same discriminatory patterns to stay in the region. So there's Armenians, we have our own republic that was in the Soviet Union, got independence, but there was an area, it's called Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh, that the Soviet Union gave to Azerbaijan, kind of those same like imperialist, colonial, dividing up people who used to be neighbors and giving them, you know, worse feelings about each other. But it was a very majority Armenian area, even though they lived, you know, alongside Azeri and other neighbors. And in 2020, at the same time the Tigray genocide was happening, there was a war broke out and it led to mass displacements, giving up of land, and it sort of felt like, oh, we just had this genocide recognition, but all that we fought for, the US didn't really get involved, the world kind of turned an eye to it, let it happen, let Russia deal with it. So it felt like that was all for none. I remember like it being COVID, seeing a lot of posts online about Tigray and feeling like this is happening in the world, none of it ever mattered. It was a very dark time, and so I think Armenians had to sort of turn their advocacy to more current events and like what is happening now in the world that are allowing these same patterns to keep repeating. So there was a lot more like social media campaigns to educate other communities, build solidarity with other communities, figure out what dynamics were happening in the wider world. But unfortunately, none of it really made a difference yet. So 2022 until recently, there was a complete blockade against the Armenians living in this area, Artsakh. And then it ended, unfortunately, 2 months ago with the complete ethnic cleansing of all Armenians from that region. So there's over 100,000 refugees, all now in the Republic of Armenia. There's no Armenians living in Artsakh for the first time in like 5,000 years. And it was sort of, I think for my generation, a complete blow in terms of advocacy, because we felt like everything we had worked towards, building awareness, building connections in government, was just blown away because we couldn't this time sort of prevent what had happened before to our ancestors. So I think the lessons out of that I see are sort of taking a bigger world approach to our problems, and we stay oftentimes like very in our community, only talk about our genocide, but realizing like how connected all of our conflicts are and how connected like these global systems of power are that allow these issues to happen. So I think in the wake of, it's so fresh, it just happened 2 months ago, but I think in the wake of that, we're all realizing to get connected with communities around us, understand what the power dynamics are. There's been a big emphasis on understanding geopolitics more, but sort of breaking them down, and that we can't just rely on who's seen as our traditional allies, and we have to really build connections, educate, make new ways of moving forward, because while it was so important what everyone who came before us did and what we did to gain that recognition, it's still not a full recognition if we can't prevent acts in the future. So sort of to move to the second question of what challenges exist in raising awareness of genocide and how can we educate the public. I think something the speakers have really talked about is personal stories and connecting to people on a personal level. And so when we saw Tigray Archive, we were so excited because I run an Armenian archive with a similar purpose of documenting stories from recent atrocities to the Armenian community and then using those stories to build advocacy and educational tools. And so that was sort of a response to, if we're so stuck in the past, we're going to ignore what's happening to our communities now. So we have a strong Armenian community in Syria who was affected by the war. We have the people from Artsakh now who were affected. There are people who went through pogroms back in the 90s. And sort of we were ignoring all these stories of the current day, focusing on the past. So now that we're all Armenians are sort of focusing on the current day, using the individual stories as a way to both document history and then also use their stories as a way to guide us where we're going in the future. And so I think the power of an individual story is both that maybe you can draw more people in who wouldn't. Oftentimes I feel like our conflicts get shown as, oh, it's too complicated. Like, I don't know what's happening. Oh, this group hates that group. It's just like ancient history. And it's really not. Like, we're from very similar cultures. It's, as we mentioned, like colonial, imperial, political things that put us against each other. And it's like taking that back down to the human story as a way to bring people in who might just put it off as like, oh, those people don't like each other. So it's one in that way as an educational tool, and then also making sure that all our advocacy for what Armenians want in the wake of this ethnic cleansing is focused on what those communities actually want, not the people in power, not the big political groups, but the refugees themselves. So there's definitely still a lot of challenges, but we're addressing them by documenting and then using those firsthand testimonies to pave our path moving forward. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Yes. Yeah, you know, patterns, something that we all we're learning and we're noticing, and you know, what now, what happens next, and bringing it down to the level of people. What do the people want? What do the people need? Why am I speaking on behalf of the people, right? So I completely and 100% agree with you. Thank you, Annie, for that. So if you have any more questions for Annie, please make sure that you check out the tables as well, and we'll get to learn a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to Dr. Yo for the next question that I have. We have a couple questions since this topic is about justice and accountability for genocide. Thank you for being here. So our first questions are, how can the international legal framework effectively address the crimes of genocide and ensure accountability for perpetrators? And how do domestic legal systems in countries affected by genocide contribute to or hinder justice and accountability efforts?
Well, thank you so much. And again, this is a wonderful program, and I think it's exactly what's needed. I think it's part of the Yeah, I think it was on. I'll just raise my voice. Sorry. Yeah, and I think this is one of the ways that the international community can actually help to bring about accountability. Is that oftentimes the people groups that are victims of genocide, they're kind of unrepresented peoples. You know, the fact of the matter is that in this world, it seems to be that that if you don't have power, your voice isn't heard. Now, it doesn't mean that gaining of power has to be in a manner that's inappropriate, but it does mean that we can gain power by holding solidarity together, by recognizing that that we all have gone through the same thing, and then by uniting our voices, and that's where the power comes from. So, with that being said, I think. That's how I'm going to try and answer the first question. How can international frameworks effectively address the crimes of genocide? I think, first of all, we have to look at the international frameworks themselves. Oftentimes, the international frameworks are inadequate. Oftentimes, there's a thraldom to say state sovereignty. So people will say, well, we can't do that. We can't do anything about that because it's that state's issue. Oh, but they're killing people, women and children and so forth. Oh, but that's an internal issue. So this kind of talk about it being an internal issue then results in a kind of both sidesism, right? Well, both sides have committed atrocities. Yes, okay, there's atrocities committed there, but this is the state. The state has a responsibility to protect. So it can no longer be considered to be, you know, when one of the sides is the state, it behooves the international community to step in and say, well, you're the state. You're not allowed to do this, even if the rebels are doing that, right? So it cancels out this sort of both sidesism. And I think the international community, its legal frameworks, have to add in an understanding, a codification of the existence peoples. Oftentimes when genocide is committed, it's not, when you hear about it, it's not that, okay, this group of people have been victims of this genocide. It's often there's conflict here. There's communities fighting. Which communities? Who's being killed, right? Are they all the same? So you sort of get the sense that that it's people from that neighborhood, they just got into a fight or something like that. When really we don't get the proper sense that these are whole people groups. These are entire nations at war with one another. It doesn't matter if it's in the belly of the same state. So the international legal framework has to somehow start addressing that. Okay. Until then, we can't even get to talking properly about crimes of genocide, because if you haven't even recognized the nations, how can you talk about genocide when genocide is to kill a nation? So first of all, the legal frameworks have to have a full-throated avowal of the fact that there are, ethnic groups, right? And then there are ethnic tensions, and this conflict is ethnic in nature. I don't think that we should be coy about that, but oftentimes in the international community, people are, right? Because of course, the word genocide has a lot of political weight to it, and political weight that it should have, right? So until then, how could we ensure accountability for perpetrators? Because if we don't talk about the nations or the ethnic groups that are victims of this, then what are the perpetrators to be accountable for? And then we end up sort of with weak measures such as, well, we're going to sanction so-and-so or so-and-so, right? But then sanctioning them, oftentimes they've already built themselves into a bunker where now they have, their ethnic group holding them back or having their back, and so then you get this cycle of clientelism, and mixed together with ethnic identity, which bolsters and holds safe these perpetrators, right? Because the perpetrators then say to their ethnic group, well, if they hold me accountable, they're really attacking you. And then it just begins this cycle of people looking at each other again. So then the perpetrators are never isolated. So I think that's how the international community, I've sort of answered your question by saying, here's how the international community does it wrong, here's what should be done. But I think these are easy fixes, right? So putting into the international framework the unrepresented people groups that are often victims of this, and ensuring that perpetrators don't tap into this cycle of clientelism and ethnic identity. Until then, I'm not sure we can properly address that. So I hope I've answered the question there. That's the first one.
Yeah. No, right. Putting faces to the victims, to the crimes, to the act of the crimes. Right. That's always, forgotten. It's, as you said, it's very generalized. It's only seen as something is happening out there, conflict, or somebody got into a fight. So definitely, but if you don't name it, if you don't call it out, you can't address it, right? So thank you. So the next questions that we do have is, are truth and reconciliation processes effective in achieving justice and accountability for genocide, and how do they compare to legal trials? And another one is, what role does the international community play in supporting and obstructing efforts of bringing genocide perpetrators to justice? But I think you did answer that second part of it, so let me give it to you.
Okay. So you want me to go for our truth and the third one? Okay. Our truth and reconciliation process is effective in achieving justice. I think with so many things, this question depends on context. And by context, it depends on the country we're talking about. How connected are the people anyways? Are they neighbors, or are we talking about countries divided up into regions that are effectively countries within one? I think it's the latter that you often see in places like Africa, right? So for instance, take the Nuer genocide, or take the Tigray genocide. Yes, you do have centers where people are, where your neighbor is going to be of a different ethnic group, but there are also cases where there's the ancestral homeland of a particular ethnic group. And then oftentimes you have in these situations where the state power is held by a rival ethnic group, and then it uses the state power to attack its rival ethnic group. So I think in those cases, I wonder how effective truth and reconciliation processes are. Because in those cases, you effectively have, you have a whole bunch of world wars in Africa, right, happening in these states. So in those cases, I wonder how effective truth and reconciliation are, because people don't know themselves too well. It's not as though it's necessarily my neighbor that's come and like attacked me. It's people from that other effectively ethnic group or country, for that matter, that have come and attacked me. So I think in those cases, it's best to have more formal legal frameworks, right, where leaders can be identified, something like what we had in the Nuremberg trials, right? But of course, that requires there to be a strong, international pressure, right? And I think oftentimes it's that strong international pressure that's lacking, because again, there's a recourse to people saying, well, it's an internal matter and the like, right? So I think it depends on whether or not people or have already formed before the genocide these sort of communal connections, because then then people can appeal back to those communal connections, and then there can be a truth and reconciliation. But in a lot of cases, like for instance in South Sudan, truth and reconciliation meetings have been tried before. There's been conflict between various ethnic groups. And I'll just say too, oftentimes it's said like, the Nuer community, the Dinka community, etc., right? And you might think that, there are groups of people, maybe 200,000 in number and so forth, but these are whole nations of 5-6 million, right? And so when we talk about their conflicts, we're talking about them raising armies of 200,000 men, 300,000, etc. It's not some small thing, right? And so in cases such as that, truth and reconciliation meetings have been held in the 80s, the 90s, and they haven't borne much fruit, because how do you hold people accountable in such things, right? When there are clear structures, when there's army structures and the like, right? And the ethnic groups they don't see their soldiers as like perpetrators or acting on their own right. They see them as their protectors. So they're going to protect them legally in these truth and reconciliation meetings, right? So I think there has to be overarching sort of international power and pressure, and there has to be something that could be lost by these leaders, right, in some way, in order for truth and reconciliation processes to work. And so that said, I think domestic legal frameworks in countries affected by genocide, they can, at least in the South Sudan case, they can often hinder it, right? Because there you have cases of hegemony where the domestic legal system is often held by the rival ethnic group, right? And so then you're not going to have any of these legal systems being brought to bear to deal with questions of genocide. So, sorry, I think, sorry.
No, you're right. No, that makes sense, where the judge, the executioner, and what's the list of the lawyer being the perpetrator, and you're like, well, how can we expect justice from the very same person that is holding the legal system? And yeah, that's why we need that international pressure or an outside source that says, in case of genocide, in case of human right violation or ethnic cleansing that is targeting a certain group of people, this needs to be applied, right? It cannot be left to the sovereignty or for the main actor. So the last question is really, what lessons can be learned from past genocide cases to improve future efforts to achieve justice and accountability?
I think that here, it requires us to expand a little bit. What is it that we're looking for exactly? Genocide's a terrible thing. Like it's a mass murder of people, right? But and we want to move past the sort of the fact that it feels so bad and it's so horrible when we think about it, right? And then we need to build structures that prevent it. But what exactly are we looking for? What is the end goal? And I know that we want the end goal, okay, for the suffering to stop, right? But what do we want the world to look like afterwards, right? So here's one thing, right? Suppose somebody says, well, look, we want to get rid of identities, right? Identities are what are causing the conflict, right? Maybe we should all get rid of our identities and we should be the same thing. I don't think that's the answer, right? It seems to me that we want to live in a world in which there are Tigray, there are Nuer, there are Armenians, and that's, everybody brings their sort of cultural achievement to the potluck, right? I like being Nuer, you like being what you are, and I like the fact that you are what you are, right? And so I think that's one thing that we're looking for. Now, how do we maintain that, right? Well, people have, it seems to me, various dimensions to themselves, right? There's an economic dimension, there's a social dimension, and oftentimes the crime of genocide, what it attempts to do is to, again, kill a nation, but not just their bodies. Oftentimes the physical genocide is taken, it goes alongside a psychological genocide, where you dehumanize people. And it goes alongside an educational genocide. You make sure that their children don't go to school. Then it goes alongside an economic genocide, where you make sure that they're not able to build themselves economically. So I think it seems to me that what we can learn from past genocides, we can learn oftentimes from the failures, because if we just address, if we just talk about how, look, it's necessary for us to accept each other's humanity, absolutely. But to accept another person's humanity is to accept their right to build themselves economically, is to accept their right to have a place where they can live, to be free from fear, free from want, and free from fear and free from want, I think so. Or like this expanded sense of human security. And so we've got to ask ourselves, if we want to bring about accountability, we have to ensure that affected groups have a sort of territorial kind of integrity where they feel safe in their home. They have to have a sense of economic welfare where they can build themselves, right? Because otherwise, we haven't addressed, what the genocider wanted to do. The perpetrator wanted to do this precisely so that they are not economically powerful, so that they're not a competitor for them. So I think those things have to be addressed. Otherwise, we haven't achieved justice, okay, and we haven't achieved accountability. So, so I think in those cases, it's people often get a little uncomfortable, right? Because then it could be like, well, are you suggesting we split up these countries? Are you suggesting that there's autonomy and like, right? And I think that often take the cushion, the sort of pressure off this cooker, it's a good idea to start talking about how can we help to redevelop people that have been victims of genocide economically. Can there be anything that can be put in place to codify where they live so they have a sense of security? I think we have to start, looking at things like that. Otherwise, the cycle continues, and the perpetrator's aims are met, and then the perpetrator can, work with the old adage that it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. So I think that's.
Thank you. Please give a hand to Dr. Yol for this. This is very informative. It is very key, and I have 1,000 follow-up questions, but can't do it. Can't break my own rules. So next, we're gonna go to Abraham from Tigray community, where his topic will be social media and genocide. Abraham, thank you for joining us today. So I just have a couple questions for you. The first two are: what are the potentials of consequences of hate speech on individuals and society within social media? And are algorithms used by social media platforms inadvertently promoting or amplifying hate speech? If so, how?
Shall I say good morning or
good afternoon, good evening, yeah.
Okay. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you for having me, especially for the organizing committee for establishing this platform and honoring inviting me to speak out on the behalf of the victim families. And my name is Abraham, and the son of late Professor Mara Gamar of Bahar Dar University. As like of my parents, I am second son for the family. And just before I just coming to those questions, I want to just give some glance about the story. The first slide. This my father. We just took this picture while we were walking around the city, Bahar Dar. He was busy for his entire life in laboratory and in his laptop. So we just, I just recommend him to have a walk, even though my mom was complaining a lot because we just talk a lot and we didn't know how many miles we just walked, and he ended up with some pains in his knees. So, and also this place is finally that mountain called Dubanke. So after the tragedy, this place is the one who they just buried him. So it just gives, it has a lot of stories behind. And in the next slide, this one is, this photo was taken 2 weeks before the tragedy. And he wear the same t-shirt. And one thing I remember from my parents, there was a regular morning argument between my mom and dad. She used to entitle herself to choose him a clothes, and he don't prefer to wear different clothes. And he said, well, Nigusti, her name is Nigusti, so you are trying to make me look good always. So if someone took me, it's all about, it's up to you. So, this was the t-shirt he wear for on November 3, and this photo was taken in birthday party in family house. And when this one is my dad was, we call him Babaye, so he was busy in just making history, in making documentations, articles, and other stuff. He didn't just give time for celebration. And our neighbors have heard about his promotion, his professorship. He didn't even, he just wear his pajama. He didn't just give time for celebration, but they just turned to our house and they were complaining about why he didn't told them about the news, which was posted on Facebook, and it was broadcast on state television. So he was among the 3 full professors of full professor of analytical chemistry in the country, and he was one and only in Bahar Dar University. Well, this is my mom, this is our compound. The one I just circulated was the last scene of the crime, and it was under the mango tree, and yeah. Well, having this, it might take a lot of time to just tell the full story, and which is not pleasant. And I better to focus on the questions that matters the most. So, to start with the first question, what are the potential consequences of hate speech? Well, especially, we all, as a family, my father was born and raised in Aksum, in a rural village of Addis Afi. And my mom, parents, they are originally from Tigray, but they were living in Gondar, Dabat town for 65 years. So she was born and raised in that city, and I was born and raised in Bahar Dar, all of the family. So we know that we are Tigrayans, but we were accustomed by the Amharan culture, and the whole family were law-abiding citizens who trust on the society. in the neighbors and who contributes the most or the better for the entire country. Specific to the hate speech, I just share some of screenshots that can give us a clear picture of how hate speech or hateful incitements can bring or it has a deadly consequence upon the society. So this one, the first post is from that of Masai Makonnen. I remember while I was just reading this post, I was just shaking my hand because literally, especially the last statement, it's just inciting the government that, you know, Masai Makonnen, he was a mouthpiece of the government, and I know that something posted on Facebook will have severe consequences. So regardless of the political affiliation, all Tigrayans should be taken to that of the concentration camp. So I knew that such kind of posters are directly attacking those civilians, like my parents and I myself. And I was curious. I was taking a screenshot because such kind of posts will trigger the government and the mob to take action against the Tigrayans. And the next one, this one is Binyam. So he's also our neighbor. So he just incited. He's the best friend of mine, and it just pressure. We need to be what we call it mad, or we need to be we need to take action against the Tigrayans, and regardless of the social fabrics that or the social. So that one is also the other post 2 or 3 days before the tragedy, and this one is the godfather of the family, and this photo was taken during his PhD graduation, and yeah. Due to that of the hateful incitement, everyone, including that the one who visited our house for 30 years, refused to give a proper burial ceremony for our father. And different posts I just share, and this one is this person is from Barda University even, so they were celebrating the death of a university lecturer in Wollo University. So this person with high profile in the university, they were celebrating how the Fanus were brave enough to take the lives of the Tigrayans in Wollo University. And particularly these are the two posters that took the lives of my father. So these posts were posted by BDU staff, which is a Facebook post with more than 50,000 followers. And I didn't know first about this post, but a friend of mine has called me and, Abraham, have you seen a post on BDU stuff? And he was nervous and he told me enough. And I was trying to go just to search it by writing a lot, but I finally found out it's a BDU staff, which belongs to Barda University staff Facebook page. So those posts were made by on the 9th and 10th of October 2021. So after I've seen those posts, I knew that it was a death sentence to my father. Literally, I knew that some online posts do have offline consequences. So I was trying to reach out Facebook by reporting for multiple times to just get their attention to remove it. But Facebook doesn't remove it until 8 days after the tragedy. And 8 days after the tragedy, they just sent me a message that these posts, they just find out it's against their community standards and removed it. So it was too late to save the lives of my father. So the story of my father can tell a lot about the suffering of Tigrayans, especially by those online warmonger activists with both verified and unverified accounts. And Facebook has been used as just a big gun, a brigade of army in just catalyzing, fueling that of hate campaigns and incitements against the Tigrayans all over the country.
Thank you, Abraham. So this is difficult. Okay, so the last question that we do have is, how can individuals and communities respond to hate speech on social media platforms in a constructive and responsible manner? Which you showed us that the effect and the consequences and the impact it has on simply liking and retweeting hate speech and personal attack on people that where you can just become God. That's what social media has given for people who wanted to use genocide to their own advantage. So how can people respond responsibly for these hate speech that we do see on social media? What do you recommend?
Well, most of the people, including my father, underestimates how social medias are powerful enough in just changing people's mind. And I remember that I was calling my father by saying that those two posters by saying that this is a Professor Marag, a Tigrayan, as if being a Tigrayan is a crime. And he's working, it says he's working in Bahar Dar University, hiding, he's a member of TPLF, just relocate his family to Addis Ababa, and he took some money and other stuff, and he fled to the US. And among those pictures of the neighbors, Mr. Girma has called, Professor, I have heard that you fled to the US. And my dad laughed, and if I'm in the US, how you just reach me by regular phone? So people were with that of stereotype, with that of, they couldn't filtrate that of true and false information. And I was telling my dad not to return back to Bahar Dar. I knew that during that time they were in Addis Ababa treating that of COVID-infected families. But Babai told me, "Oh, Abraham, just focus on your study. I have a social capital that I just built before you get born." And he refused to stay in Addis Ababa. Even some of his colleagues, and including myself and other family members, recommended him to stay in Addis Ababa for a while. And he underestimates the power of social media. And during the tragedy, that of on 3rd of November, those perpetrators were following him from the university because he was processing a document, and the last person he contacted was Dr. Seika Beda of Bahar Dar, Vice President. So those perpetrators followed him and attacked him, and they were chanting by quoting from Facebook posts. So they were forcing people not to give first aid by saying that he's a junta, that's Tigrayan, by just self-humanizing us. So there are untold stories all over, especially in our Amhara region, in Dabat, in Wollo and Gondar, including Bahar Dar. I'm the only one who is just facing that of trying to tell the story, but there are people who didn't get the chance to speak loud. Well, after all the tragedy, I finally come up with this online memorial page. So, as a family who doesn't allow to bury our father, we just come up with a solution to have an online memorial service. What can we do? So I just come up with, registered with that of my keeper. So try to tell the story of my dad, because all medias are controlled by some groups who are not allowed, even though they knew the true sense of my father. They don't allow us to tell the crime. They try to cover up it. So I just come up with it. And nowadays, almost 15,000 people has read it so far. So this one means of just reaching out the world or telling about your loved ones. And later on, I just come. Our father has lived a meaningful life, a purposeful life. So his death should not be covered by some kind of things. So I come up with that of a lawsuit against Facebook, which is directly responsible for the just cold-blooded murder of our father. So we just brought the case to the Kenyan Higher Court by just claiming that Facebook is directly responsible for inciting and causing harm and violence against my father. So this is also another way of just, option. So I think this is the way how I just.
Yeah. So taking action, I completely agree. Thank you, Abraham. Please give a hand to Abraham from me. Thank you. Thank you, Abraham. So next we're going to go to Imran. My apologies. I think all these stories again, we can't tell each community stories within 10 minutes. So, but please bear with us. So Imran, thank you for being here from the Rohingya community, where his topic is diaspora's mental health and genocide. So Imran, just have a couple questions. The first two that I do have for you is, how does the trauma of surviving or witnessing a genocide in their homeland affect the mental health of the diaspora members? And how do cultural factors, such as language barriers and cultural identity, influence the mental health of genocide survivors within the diaspora? Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here, and for the work that Tigray Archive is doing, and all the other members who have been here all morning and trying to set up this event. I deeply appreciate from my bottom of my heart for organizing this event. And to start my conversation, these are not really easy talks. These are hard. These talks make people cry. But thank you so much for being here, because it's never gonna be easy. It was never easy. It's not easy. It will never be easy. But if we don't tell our stories, someone else will tell our stories that we would not like. So it's important for us to be here, to tell our own stories, because we have the experience. We know what happened, and we know what's happening. We know what will happen, because these are our stories. It's important for us to be here to tell our own stories. They are not easy, but you just have to take the responsibility, because I am here, I am safe. Why I'm here and why I'm safe? Because of that name, because of that culture. I came here and I have the responsibility to talk about my people, to talk about other people, other communities who are going through the same experience. So I have some pictures that I want to share because I work on different projects, because I've been trying to focus on a lot of different things since I came to the United States. I had the privilege to work on a story about Jan and Jahan. They are Rohingya women, elderly women. So before I start talking about them, I just want to highlight a few things so that you have a little bit of knowledge about the Rohingya people. So Rohingya people, when the genocide started, it's a long time ago. So what happened, the first thing that happened, we became stateless. So there are a lot of people, sometimes people get confused, like, what does it mean? We became stateless in our own country. And what it means, we are not part of the constitution. So what the government did, they removed our name from the constitution. So we were not part of the constitution. That means you are not part of the country. They removed our name from the constitution. So then they did whatever they wanted. So we became stateless. And then when we leave our country, we become asylum seeker. Sometimes, it's important to understand these terminologies, because when we leave our country, we become asylum seekers. Then we become a victim of another process. So because of our statelessness, when we leave our country, we become asylum seekers. It's a long process to become a refugee. So we go through these layers, like, we became stateless, and then we became asylum seekers, and then we became refugee. And then, okay, what happened? We became refugee, and then we came to the United States. So what's happening? That's what I am trying to go. So with this, the first picture, Noor, Jan, and Jahan, so when they came to the United States, people usually think like, oh, you came to the United States, you are safe. Yes, I am safe. But there are many other layers that we need to talk about. Like, when they came to the United States, they were more than 60 years old. They were not allowed to work. And in Myanmar, we were not allowed to go to school to get an education. Dr. Yan talked about the layer of genocides. It was very interesting to hear how he described it, the layer of genocide. Like, back home, we couldn't go to school. We couldn't learn our own language, like, our national language is Burmese. So they prevented us to go to school to get an education. So what happened? They excluded our name from the constitution, and we didn't get an education. We were not allowed to involve politically in our own country. So layer of genocide, like, educational genocide, economical genocide. That's exactly what happened with our community back home. So whatever happened back home is still affecting our people in different parts of the world. So if I don't want to go to other parts of the world, I just want to talk about the US, because I am here and things can be changed. It's possible for me to talk about these issues. That's why I really focus on a story about these elderlies. When they came to the United States, they were not allowed to work, but the resettlement process only provides support for 3 months, or maybe more than 5 months. If you come to the United States with a family, you never went to school, you never touch a pen. You want them to become independent within 3 months and 5 months. You want them to learn the language. You want them to work. You want them to become educated. So what's happening? Like, they suffer persecution. They went through hell in different parts of the world. Now in the United States, just bringing in them here doesn't solve all the problems. All the policymakers who are making policies about this diverse community have no clue. They don't know the name of your community, and they're just making the policies. So that's why, it's what they are going through at the moment. That no one is talking about their mental health. Like, people just take things for granted. Like, they are here, they are safe, they have roof over their head, and then what's happening next? No one is talking about their mental health. That's why I really talked when I wrote the stories. I talked about resettlement process and what needs to be changed, because the system that you made is outdated. It needs to be changed to protect human dignity. If bringing refugees to the United States is not a solution, you have to go beyond that to really protect human lives. Can you go to the next one? In that picture, there are some elderlies. They are trying to learn some English so that they can get their citizenship. The picture was in the Rohingya Cultural Center. We are very lucky to have a Rohingya Cultural Center, and it's run by Rohingya people. And the center provides a lot of services to the Rohingya community in Chicago. I wish we had more in every state, because having a center like this is something that I don't know how to explain it. Okay, let me give you a story just to explain what a community-based organized does for the community. So before they had the center, many Rohingya people in Chicago, they were really dependent on the support from the resettlement agencies. So a lot of Rohingya people came to the United States, and they don't speak the language. So some of them told me when I was talking to them, they said, okay, when we didn't have the center here in the United States, I had to go to the resettlement agency just to see my caseworker, just to make an appointment. So they took a day off just to make an appointment. They couldn't go to work for the whole day, and they went there. Sometimes they were lucky if they had an interpreter. If the caseworker had an interpreter, they were able to talk to the caseworker and met the appointment, and they came home. And then they went back to the agency again another day just to talk about their one issue. So when you don't have the language, you receive multiple letters in your mail, and you have no clue, and you just want to know what's going on, why I'm receiving these letters. Can you see their mental health, what's happening in their head? Because if you don't respond to their letters, what will happen? You will lose your benefit, you will not have medical benefits, your children can't go to school, and you will lose your work, all these layers. So that person, some of them told me it's okay, I went there, and then sometimes I couldn't talk to the caseworker because they didn't have an interpreter. And then, just to solve one problem, they spent 4 days just to solve one problem, just to understand what's happening with one letter. And then when they had the center, so what happened, they can come to the center anytime, whenever they want. They can just walk in and they can get things done in 10 minutes before they spend 5 days. So having a community-based organization really change communities' lives. But these communities don't have the main power. They don't have the fund. They don't have the resources to truly show the work they do. During COVID, Rohingya Cultural Center was open all day long, every single day. All the other organizations, they shut their doors. They were saying, "No, I am not allowed to provide services to you in person." Okay. And you just want me to call you, and I don't have the language. How do you want me to call you and talk to you? So sometimes, all these big organizations have no clue what's happening with different communities, who suffer persecution and they were victim of genocide. They just suffered all these traumas in their lives, and they come to this country without having any knowledge about this world. And all these organizations have no clue, and they don't take the time to really understand. If you are, there are a lot of agencies, big organizations like Catholic Charities. There are many other resettlement agencies, and they are working with their clients. From my experience, what I saw, they are not spending a day to really understand their client. You have caseworkers, you have other workers, you are not taking a day to really help your employees understand your client. So you are just doing the job. But when you are working with human, it's not just work. You need to really understand your client, because handing them papers, okay, you came here, These are your papers. You are allowed to work. Go out there and find work and just work. And you don't know what's happening the next day. Because even though when I came to the United States, I had the language. I was very lucky to be able to communicate with people. But I was lost. So just imagine about someone who came to this country without any language, without any friends, without any knowledge, and you want them to become self-sufficient within 3 months. Can you move to the next one?
So Imran, I'm just gonna, I think, just round a couple more things since I have evidence and proof, people coming and telling me to cut it a little bit short. But mental health, the key point being is you need to be accepted in order for you to have something or to call your own. Doesn't mean just bringing you into a refuge or an area of safe zone means it has covered everything, right? Like that's basically it. Having location, access, community, support, and just being to be heard, right? This is a place they can go and to speak with one another. People, they may be from the same community, but not all Tigrayans know each other. So being able to talk to one another, being able to hear each other's stories is some part of that healing and recovery process. So I'm just going to give you a minute or two to wrap up, but we have another segment of this program, but you do have access to our panelists to ask more questions, to get your business cards and to get your brochures, to continue this connection that we have today. Make this connection, use it for the bigger advantage, which is addressing genocide and coming together as community, because we all are suffering and going through the same pain collectively because of this one thing, and it's genocide. And we stand against genocide as humanity, as communities, not as a single individual or community. So Imran, let me give you a minute and we will wrap up to our segment. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eden. I know these talks are very hard and they take time. I'm just going to wrap up with a few things. So really to talk about the mental health, it's what I can see from my experience and from my work, there is a generational trauma that we are seeing in our community, and I believe in our other communities. And also there is isolation because, there are many communities like mine, and because when they come to the United States, they don't come with the language. They're isolated because they don't have. If they don't have the language, they can't go to another community to mingle. Like they don't have the language, so they are literally stuck within their comfort zone. Then their culture is their comfort zone, and also we can see that there will be a next generation. They will be lost because I was born in Myanmar. It's my faith, my culture, and my identity is strong because I was there. I saw these things. But the next generation, they were born here, right? Their faith is less strong. They don't have a lot of awareness about their culture, about their parents' past. One of the parents the other day were telling me, I can't communicate with my children because they only speak English. And when I try to communicate with them, they don't speak my language. So this is a very sad reality. And so this next generation, so we are going to see that they will be lost. They will not fit with American culture. They will not fit with their own culture. They will be in the middle and they will be lost. So just to finishing up, fostering awareness about our communities, it's really important because the professionals, they are educated, but they are not educated about individual communities. We need to educate them. We have to tell our stories again and again so that they know what's happening. And one last thing before, just to wrap up. We might think that we are immune to this genocide experience. I hope we are, but that's not the case. It happened to my community. It happened to other communities. It keeps happening. So that's why it's very important for us to become aware about these atrocities and this human suffering, because when you are aware about these sufferings, we'll take action to stop further sufferings. Thank you.
Once again, thank you guys so much. Give it one more round of applause for our panelists. Thank you for driving all the way over here and just having such fruitful conversations with us as we continue to make our connections with one another. This pretty much wraps up the formal aspect of our program for today.